Yeah, very interesting. Our predictions constantly being correct. The dump in oil, we predicted that after predicting the rise.
Just on that point that you mentioned on the retracement line, the US Treasury actually put out a statement saying they were going to do something about oil prices, and they specifically mentioned the futures market, which I took to mean the US Treasury at some point is going to slam the futures market to get the price to reduce the price of oil. And
Mm.
if they do that, and I know it does have a big fall of $5 or $6 per barrel, then you should get in there and buy because yes, governments can manipulate prices in the
Yeah.
short term. They can't manipulate it for very long. The markets are too big for them to manipulate for very long. Everybody talks when we're talking about the stock market. When the stock market has falls, there's apparently some secretive group called the Plunge Protection Team in the US, and every time the market falls too far, the Plunge Protection Team steps in and they buy the futures, they buy the S&P futures, and the market starts going up, and then people follow suit. So they're
Yeah.
going to kind of do the opposite of that with we need to think of a name for it, but they're going to come in perhaps and slam oil. In fact, they basically said they're going to do it. I kind of expected it today, but
Definitely extreme manipulation. The price going from 120 and then Trump announcing the war's over, which is basically not true. I mean, he was able to manipulate the last crash we predicted, which was, the tariff crash. And then he said, buy the dip, and everyone listened to him and bought the dip. I mean, this time everyone seems to listen to him when he says the war's over when it's clearly not over.
well,
But yeah.
the Treasury did put out some kind of press release that we spoke about in our last video that said that they were going to use the futures market to bring down the oil price,
Mm.
which again, and we said this the last time, that of course, nobody knows for certain. Your point is perfectly true. Trump did make comments which are nonsensical. Why anyone would trade on anything that comes out of Trump's mouth, I don't know, because he tells so many untruths that you can't take anything that he says seriously. But yeah, the Treasury said they were going to manipulate the market, or they didn't say manipulate, but they said they were going to use the futures market as part of the strategy to bring the oil price down. So, nobody knows whether that's what actually happened with the big dump when it
Mm.
fell by $10 or so a few days ago. But in any case, it doesn't matter because the government cannot manipulate the price of anything for very long. They can manipulate it short term, either by the words of politicians like Trump, which are proved to be untrue.
Yeah.
You only have to look at what Trump said when he was talking about this bombing of the girls' school where they killed 170 kids, and he said it was Iran that did it when everyone's got footage of the American missile hitting it. And even after the U.S. Defense Department admitted that it was a mistake, that they did this, which effectively is mass murder, and
Mm.
Trump still is coming out and saying, "Well, I don't know. It's not. I think it was the Iranians, which it clearly
No, it
was.
wasn't.
Why would they bomb their own school? It's like when they said that the Russians bombed their own pipeline when they bombed this pipeline taking Russian gas to Germany.
Mm.
So it's just nonsensical.
Yeah, I mean, I point out to that. I mean, I think I saw, was it maybe Patrick Bet David or another channel mentioning that they had old information and they didn't update the information. Apparently, it used to be a IRGC or Iranian headquarters that then got converted into a school, but that was like maybe 5, 10 years ago, and then they just totally well, that's their argument. But I mean, linking to what you've been saying earlier, reasonably pro-Trump at the beginning of this channel. And but you never know when people get into power, do they get compromised? Do bureaucrats get involved? I mean, we predicted also Elon Musk quitting and leaving that whole process, which suggests that, some of the stuff that was agreed beforehand is not the case now. I mean, even more manipulation of price, that there was, tweets of oil tankers getting through, which just weren't true, and then they had to delete them. So more efforts potentially to manipulate price to assist their kind of invasion, and try and negate that. But this is scary, and I think a really good thing you said in the last video, which has also come to fruition, is this, how many days these countries in the area actually have before they stop producing oil, and that's going to have long lasting
And
supply chain
I
issues.
understand that now the UAE has actually stopped producing. They have actually had to shut down wells, which
Mm.
they're obviously not one of the biggest producers. Saudi is by far the biggest in the region, and they were the one that have got the longest lead time because they have pipelines. They have got 60 days before they have to shut down wells. But some countries, Kuwait, I think possibly too,
Mm.
are already shutting down wells, and of course that's taking capacity out of the market, which is not just it's not just as easy as flicking a switch and turning a well off and on. It's a major project to get them back online again. So that again is going to push the oil prices up, even if this conflict were to end
Mm.
sometime soon, which is not looking like it's going to.
No,
It's
no.
like it's getting worse. So the oil price prediction of taking out the old high and heading towards 200, I would stand firmly by that and say
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
who's not in oil, buy the dips.
Mm.
But if the US government can somehow manipulate it short term and get it down to $80 again, get in there and buy. Load the fill your boots with oil futures. It's it's a great opportunity. If you miss out on gold or silver or uranium or all the other things that we've been talking about that have gone up exponentially, this is a great opportunity to get into oil.
Absolutely. I mean, in the video as we were rising, we also said, I think I'm showing a screen here. Yeah, buy on the 9 moving average, buy on the 50, buy on the 200, and we came back to that 9 after an extremely aggressive, looks like manipulated move of price. Yeah, and that was a perfect buying opportunity. I actually added to my short on the main market when that happened, which is a very very good point.
But
You
the
mate.
big thing is what is going to, we're not just talking about oil price rises, but we could be looking at oil shortages where it's difficult to get oil, get fuel for vehicles, and to get things that
It's
are
going to be big.
made of oil, like pharmaceuticals, for example. And the big worry, of course, for everyone should be fertilizer, because if you don't have fertilizer, which is a byproduct of oil, then the food supply goes down substantially
Mm.
and potentially pretty quickly as well. So if this continues and the oil supply is curtailed for a long time, it's going to cause all sorts of problems that nobody has even considered yet.
Yeah,
So
recession, depression stuff we're talking about here is really it's really bad. It is really bad.
if you look at what happened in Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, where they had a government who banned fertilizer because they wanted all the crops to be organic, and what happened? They ran out of food, and the country basically went bankrupt, and that could be a proxy for for
Mm.
the world. That if this continues for any length of time and we run out of fertilizer, pharmaceuticals, the transportation is slowed. It's you're talking about not just a recession, but something much worse.
Yeah, and there was this talk of an emergency, supply. The four was it 400 million barrels? I mean, how do you reckon that's going to affect things? Is it just kind of
Well, I think that doesn't cover the world. I'm not sure about the exact numbers of how many barrels the world uses per day, but I don't think that's going to keep things going for more than a week or two.
yeah, yeah. It shows that what they say and what they do is are totally different things because Trump's saying the war's over. 400 million barrels is more than any other war in history. I think in the Ukraine war, it was 165 million barrels. In the Gulf War, it was like 80. So this is the most, more than double the most that's ever been issued in any war during the Second World War, anything ever. So it shows
It,
that this is serious.
it comes back to all the things that we're recommending on here.
Mm,
It's things that can't be printed out of thin air. They can print money out of thin air. You can basically print stocks out of thin air, and the money that's created can buy stocks. So stocks can
mm.
go up much more easily. But you can't print gold out of thin air. You can't print oil out of thin air. You can't print silver out of thin air. So these are the things that you want to put your money in, and all the things that can be printed out of thin air will eventually collapse. And fiat
Yeah,
currencies are something that has been on our radar as
for the
something
longest.
that's going to collapse. I mean, it's surprising that they haven't collapsed yet, but it
I
will
think
happen.
I think actually, I think I might make a crazy prediction here. I mean, we've been talking about this stuff for the longest period of time. I think if this escalates, it could be the end of, especially after watching this Professor Jang of predictive history, who called all of this stuff to happen 2, 3 years ago before Trump got elected. I think we're finally going to see maybe the end of fiat and the end of the dollar and the US economy as we know it. If they don't fully win this war, and like you say, and just talking about the stuff you're talking about, how they just pump money into the economy, the markets are rising on thin air all the time, all these PE ratios we've been talking about. I think this could be the ultimate crash where we've talked about, the dip buying not working
Yeah.
anymore. I think
I
we're
think, I think
actually very close to that point.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see the reserve currency status of the US dollar compromised to a large extent because
Mm.
other governments don't want to hold it anymore. They see that I think the US government made a big strategic error and the Europeans by freezing the Russian government's assets because now every other government sees that that was done and think, well, we don't want that to happen to us. And I think that's one thing that's been responsible for gold's rise because they're moving out of dollars and out of US Treasuries and into gold because that can't be stolen in the way that the US government and the Europeans stole the Russian assets.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's not a single thing I don't agree on. And actually, there was rumors on of Russia now supplying and supporting Iran, which I always find a little bit confusing because they seem to have very different beliefs. Obviously, there's a lot of there's this sort of religious aspect to this as well, which is quite interesting. Why Trump, you were talking about, if we're going to go on to conspiracy rant, we can do that as well, but why Trump is doing what he's doing, Israel pulling people in. Obviously, Iran is like a certain sect of Islam, which is very much more like to the bitter end. I think it's the Shias, and they're actually a small uh, sort of sect of Islam, but
Mm.
they are not gonna, they would happily bring this into a war of attrition and bring it absolutely to the bitter end, which might mean ground troops, which I think this predictive history guy has predicted. But also it's interesting because there's lots of talk from the Jewish side, about accelerating the end times, which is quite scary, and the bringing back the Messiah sooner rather than later. And in Revelation in the Bible, it talks about it coming from up there, which is around Iran, around Russia. So there are, and it talks about wars and rumors of wars and all these things. You can see how these things.
Well, I think any of these religious fundamentalists are very dangerous, no matter what the religion, whether it's Islam,
Yeah.
Christianity, Judaism, whatever. I think they can all be dangerous in their own ways. So when they take it to these kind of extremes, particularly Israel and they seem to somehow have got control of Trump because Trump's doing the opposite of everything he said he was going to do. He said no wars. He said end of taxes. He said reduce spending, and he's done exactly the opposite of everything that he said he was going to do, which suggests that he is compromised in some way, or he
Yeah.
was just lying to start with, or I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's somehow compromised and being forced to do things that he didn't want to do.
Yeah, you kind of think that that would be a little bit more understandable. But equally, if you're a God-fearing person like myself, maybe you wouldn't actually care and you just go down and enjoy the next life. But clearly, clearly this is a big deal. So, and it is all very interesting stuff. And obviously, we don't really talk much about religion, but I think this conflict, whether you like it or not, is definitely it's definitely baked in there and a
It's,
big
it's,
factor to a lot of this stuff.
it's certainly a factor in it, and
Mm,
these the people behind it, whether it's the Islam side or the Christian
mm,
Judaism side, they're all fundamentalists in their way, a lot of major wars in history have been about religion, which
mm.
it's somewhat scary, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and as a Christian, it's kind of exciting, kind of scary. I mean, you kind of when, like we said earlier, that I don't mind when rubbish politicians get into power because it feels like the end times is sooner, and that's not because I necessarily want stuff to end sooner, but you can see why maybe Christian side more with the Jews building this temple. I mean, actually, another prediction was, I mean, these are just things to bear in mind, was that the what's the mosque on top of the Al-Qar's mosque on Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock or whatever. There's the predictive history guys made some points. Obviously, the Christians and the Jews side with that, and they might end up trying to destroy that, and whilst or maybe claim an Iranian missile hits it and things like that. So there's definitely crazy rabbit holes you can go down. But
For me, I just focus on what they're doing to the markets, and
yeah.
yes, I'll stick with my oil futures and my gold and silver, and be ready for the end of times that way.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And actually, I think during that whole process, it's not going to be a quick one. It'll be a slow one, and real assets are the things that are going to rise during that time, and you can protect yourself in this life or the next life, basically. So,
For sure, but
or both, absolutely both.
I wouldn't want to be one of these people who rush to move to the Middle East to Dubai and so on and you get missiles raining down on you now, which again could accelerate, and I
Mm,
think there's more drones going into buildings in the Biofinancial Centre today, and obviously the hotels are deserted. People are trying to get out, and yeah, you wonder what the future holds for cities like Dubai, which are built on the reputation for safety, which doesn't exist, and how do they get that reputation back again? It's obviously it's something we talk about on here, tax-free havens. But is Dubai still valid as a tax-free haven? Would you consider moving to Dubai nowadays?
yeah. No, exactly is the answer there.
Hmm.
And also there's rules in place there that, once again, religious, not as crazy as the other areas of the world, but yeah, there's I mean even influencers apparently when they go there they have to make a certain number of positive posts, it's rumored, about Dubai. Not necessarily like crazy pro, crazy anti, but yeah, there's a reason the reason I mentioned that is because I know a property investor influencer he's come back to the UK, started buying up a bunch of churches, is from Dubai, and then randomly after doing all of that, makes a massive he's now lives in Dubai, pro Islam, pro Dubai post, which is a bit weird, bearing in mind he just pivoted to a whole different angle
Well,
briefly. But
they're all doing these posts and saying thank you to Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, which is quite a strange thing to do. So it suggests that they're either being paid the influencers with a lot of followers are being paid by the Dubai authorities to promote them and promote the safety, or they're under some sort of pressure to be positive. I did see something. There's a threat of a 2-year prison sentence hanging over them if they
mm,
post anything negative about Dubai or about anyone that posts footage of any buildings that have been bombed in Dubai. They
yeah.
can actually go to prison for publicising that. Even tourists have been arrested for posting
Photo
video.
No way. Okay, that is ridiculous. I mean, at least this shows that we're not compromised. I mean, we're throwing arrows at everyone. I think I think that's the way to live,
We're
really.
not upsetting everybody. It's yeah. I mean, even until quite recently, I think it's changing now. Even until quite recently, people didn't like it. If you criticize Trump, for example, you got feedback, a lot of feedback from that, saying, "Oh, why are you criticizing Trump? He's the greatest." But I detect that's changing a little bit now.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I would have to admit that I obviously definitely wanted him in other than the alternatives. I think, there are, at the end of the day, Iran might have nuclear weapons. They are extremists. I think there is a good portion of the population that don't agree with it. Lots of women, people's rights being abused. They killed 40,000 people, protesters. So there's definitely things there that needed solving. And maybe there really wasn't an alternative, but the
I
manipulation of things and the lack of transparency and yeah, these sorts of things are overriding in terms of actually respect and liking the process, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, I think the point is, I mean, obviously from a Western perspective, we'd all like to imagine all countries to be similar to the ones that we spend time in and have the most freedom in. But the point is, Iran was not a threat to the US in any shape or form. So why are they getting themselves involved in that? Let the Iranians sort out their own problems.
Mm,
If they're not happy with the way that things are, they can take measures to change it. It's not up to Americans to disrupt the world and disrupt other regions of the world for whatever reason, which is
yeah.
what has happened because whatever they may say, there's no way that Iran was a threat to the US.
Yeah, no, exactly. And actually it links all the way back to, our product and countries that we like and not being compromised, being digital nomads. And like, obviously we've loved lots of places, but South America seems one of those places that seems to be might be the only sort of continent left after a massive world war. And that's the places we've been saying these are the tax havens for anyway.
I think particularly down in the far south of South America, down to down to Argentina and Uruguay and Paraguay and
Mm.
these kind of places are probably, yeah, amongst the safest places that don't get involved in these conflicts.
Mm,
So yeah, either that or New Zealand, but
mm,
the some are more tax friendly than others. But of course, in times of war, that may not be your first consideration. I mean, if you know have the choice of living in a tax friendly country in Europe, like Monaco, for example, or Dubai, I think I'd choose Monaco every day of the week.
yeah, that's a fair point as well. And you've actually lived there and